Hi everyone, this is Dan, and this is Shadowbinders Volume 1 and Volume 2. This was the perk for the Shadowbinders reprint Indiegogo campaign run by Clownfish Comics. See, you got that right there. Yep, there you go. So, talking about this, the origins of this. So, Clownfish Comics is sort of an offshoot, or maybe it's the original Clownfish sort of studios of Clownfish TV, which is a YouTube channel slash blog slash I think a few other things. I think they do like animation and a little bit of animation and like video game content here and there. But it is run by Kneon and GeekySparkles, who at least as far as I know, real name is Kneon is Thom Pratt, and GeekySparkles is Kambrea Pratt. Who is, that would be Kambrea being the writer, scripter, and Thom being the artist and also editor. So, why did I get this? First off, a couple reasons. I was curious. So, I had been watching Clownfish TV for a while. They're kind of the more fun pop culture channel in my mind. They don't usually, what I kind of like about them is they kind of have sort of a somewhat middle of the road, somewhat, here and there view on pop culture. They're not really into the whole screaming about, SJW thing all the time, which again, it's not that I'm against that viewpoint. It's more like I get tired of it. I also get tired of the clickbait aspect of it. And these two, Kneon and GeekySparkles, they tend to be more reserved and take more of an even-handed approach when they look at it. They definitely have their own views, and they definitely have their own opinions and frustrations on pop culture as a whole. But I kind of find their channel pretty entertaining for the most part. And then I also find their insights into webcomics and comics really fascinating, especially webcomics. For the longest time, I've been kind of interested in webcomics, and I never understood it because it kind of technically grew out in a generation after me for the most part. I think webcomics really got hot in the early aughts through like the tens, right? Is like the hot period for webcomics, I think. I think the early aughts is when they were making like tons of Google ad revenues, and then I think was it Penny Arcade ruined it for everybody. But yeah, I was really fascinated because they had like a lot of inside information and knowledge about webcomics. And these two books, by the way, Shadowbinders, was originally a free webcomic. I think they produced about 3 pages or released 3 pages every week or something like that. I forget what their publishing schedule was. But this went on for about, how long did it go? I'm going to look at it right now. 2010, and I think they stopped... I forget, it was 2013 or 2014. I forget when they stopped producing it. Anyway, the whole point being is I didn't actually follow webcomics for the most part. So it was fascinating to pick this up because it is a printed collected edition of a webcomic. And people might not recognize this, but the best way to make money off a webcomic from what I've seen is to have a very successful one that has a lot of readership and then print a collected version of it. Because outside of the Keanu Reeves book, I think the highest funded, crowdfunded comic book is still a collected webcomic. I think Order of the Stick is a collected webcomic. To me, I look at it, and if you're going to try to make money off a webcomic, it sounds like the best way to do it is to get, good readership and then print out stuff in like a crowdfunded campaign later. But anyway, let's get into the book right here. So here's some stuff right there. You can check out Clownfish TV. I actually kind of enjoy that channel personally myself. And you can kind of, there's a lot of videos on particularly webcomics and Shadowbinders from Kneon and GeekySparkles. But essentially, Shadowbinders is a romantic comedy mixed with steampunk fantasy. And what I will say is the opening is rather fascinating for a webcomic. So you got to keep in mind here, this is a webcomic, right? So normally webcomics are not produced in these tall, thin formats. Like this is more indicative of like a comic book. I think this is 3x2 formatting, right? So it's a little bit shorter than comic book standard formatting, but you could see here, like, most of the time webcomics are like strips, right? But you could see this is truly like a comic book. Now, admittedly, it's a genre that, and I'm not saying this as a diss to anybody, but it is a genre that probably wouldn't sell in comic books, not because this book is bad, but because comic books will usually not order anything that doesn't have a superhero on it, especially a popular one like Batman, Superman, X-Men, Spider-Man, right? And this is, fantasy romantic comedy. So the story is about Mia White. She lives a regular life, then she gets a gift from her grandmother, and she's transported into Never Never Land. Not a new concept, but kind of interesting in the way of its execution. So we meet Crimson Wren. This is sort of the main male romantic interest and rogue, dashing rogue. You got Winston the Phoebe, which is sort of this cartoony rabbit thingy mabobber. You got Tristan, Elena, and Andrew, and that is essentially the crew of the what is this? Oh my god, I can't forget it. It's like North Star or North Wind is the name of the airship that they have. God, my brain farts sometimes when I'm thinking about these things. But yeah, it kind of reminds me of Final Fantasy. Like, there's a very Final Fantasy VI feel, or I guess it's technically originally called Final Fantasy III in America, and then later on they corrected because it was the sixth Final Fantasy. That's the feel I really get for this book sometimes. Just a girl who's a fish out of water, and a handsome rogue helping her out, and them dealing with some baddies and whatnot. So you kind of get slowly introduced to the world of Bellatir as you go through. And I think for me, in a collected comic book format, I think if I had one area of criticism to this book, and again, nothing against GeekySparkles or Kneon, I think if you recollect this as a collected book and not a webcomic, I think the one thing I would have to say is the book doesn't do a very good job of introducing the world to you. It kind of very slowly does it. And I think that works in the webcomic format. And the reason why I say it works in the webcomic format is because webcomics are free. So technically, the goal is to gain readership, to get people kind of hooked. So a lot of times, mystery and intrigue are kind of used to keep people coming back every week to try to figure out, what's going on, right? But in the case of the book, you're kind of slogging through pages, directly and going forward with it, right? And so I think it would be best if there was like a remastered or a re-edited edition to kind of add some narration boxes, some good old classic Chris Claremont, Jim Shooter style boxes here. I think would be really useful to the book, and would add like a breath of fresh air to it to a degree. They might not care at this point because I don't know if they'll make more of these books. I hope they will, but I think it's good stuff. I mean, I'm definitely interested. And I think considering, so this is $25 for like 100 something pages, which is definitely way better than a lot of other crowdfunded comics. But I do have to warn you, it is, definitely formatted from a webcomic. So there's some early sort of like learning curve going on here. I think the one thing that bugs me the most in the early book, the early chapters of this, is the lettering. The lettering is really small in like the early chapters. But thankfully they kind of learn, and then later on you'll notice the lettering starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's like, oh, okay, much nicer. Like a lot nicer for the most part. And I like the effects. Also the coloring gets like really good later on in the book. It's like Thom or Kneon gets much more efficient and effective with his art for the most part. And I think this book, it's the bad guys, when they get introduced, it gets really intriguing. And thank goodness this is all combined as one pack, because oh my god, if this book was just like the first 40 pages by itself, I probably would give it a negative review. Just because those of you who watch my channel know I don't like decompressed storytelling. I think it's like the bane of the American comic book industry right now, especially if you're only going to sell like 48 pages. If you're going to give me a big hardbound like this, and more importantly, two big hardbounds like this, then I don't mind it nearly as much. And again, I'm not going to say that decompression is, the devil. It isn't. You can tell stories decompressed, but there's a way you kind of have to do it. So you're not kind of just wasting the reader's time. right? Like the plot and the character development has to move forward with every issue, even if you may not necessarily resolve the plot or the character arc in one issue, but it's got to move forward. You can't be, for lack of a better word, you cannot be fucking around just drinking coffee and having people screw around in an issue. That drives me nuts. If I know a series is going to do that, I'm not going to buy issues. I'm going to buy like a trade paperback, right? Because it's just, what's the point? But anyway, yeah. I also have the second volume right here. This was a lot of fun too, and the art stylism gets really I think it's not even a word. It gets really good, and I'm starting to really like Kneon's art style. His coloring gets pretty efficient. I like this. It's kind of nice for the most part. And here's the deal, right? I'm actually not a big rom-com fan, but this book has just enough action and fantasy mixed into the romantic comedy aspects of it that you don't really, when you read through this, it doesn't really necessarily feel like a rom-com. It kind of feels more like your standard fantasy novel or like young adults fantasy novel. So I had a great time reading this, and for the most part, I thought this campaign, it's closed now, so you can't get it anymore. But I thought this was a fantastic deal from Clownfish TV. It was an expensive perk, so the perk was $60, but you got 2 hardcover 100-something page books for $60. And the best part about that $60 is it included the shipping for US customers. So that was it. I didn't pay any more than that for 2 books. So essentially I got 2 hardcovers delivered to my house. In pretty good condition too. It was a good packaging by Kneon and GeekySparkles. But yeah, no, that's the video. If you are able to get a hold of these later, I definitely recommend them. They're a fun read, and I think they're a good value. Though I will say they are adapted webcomics. So if you're not into the, I wouldn't say that this is indicative of the webcomic format because it's not really. But if you are not in the mood for a sort of decompressed, sort of drawn out story, then and also the rom-com steampunk fantasy genre, it might not be for you. But if you're interested in those kind of things, definitely check it out. It's good stuff. So art, that's right. So I kind of just messed around looking at the style. One thing I noticed so the characters are Mia White and Crimson Wren. Those are the primary characters. What I kind of noticed about Kneon's style drawing Mia is I was like, oh, this really reminds me of, forget if it's pronounced Aerith or Aerith from Final Fantasy VII. The design is very, very similar, right? And then with Ren, I actually ran out of colors to try to get his cape darker than the other stuff. So if you pay attention, it's technically this is the same color as her hair. So it looks off because her hair is actually a different color. Because I didn't have a red that kind of accented her hair. I was really frustrated. My Copic marker is limited, is what I'll say. But yeah, no, it was kind of fun to draw this. I do realize something of myself. I freaking hate chains. I can draw chains, but I hate drawing them. I really do. I will not be making a 90s style character, I'll tell you that much. But otherwise, costume's pretty cool for Ren. The design's pretty nice. I feel like I should have had her bangs flop up even higher, because it always seems like in the book they're always exaggerated a little bit. But maybe that's me. I don't know. Anyhow, that's the video, guys. Let me know what you think. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. You got any comments on Shadowbinders 1, 2, or my art? Leave it down below, and I will see you next time.